I am Damon, and I will be taking you on a journey from Maya to Mari and back again. In this tutorial, which is about an hour and 20 minutes long, you'll learn the fundamentals of Mari and what to look out for. I really hope you enjoy this tutorial, so let's just dive in and get to it. Alright, ladies and gents, let's get started. So I'm in Maya. You could do this the same in 3ds Max, and I got this pumpkin over here, and what I want to do is basically grab the pumpkin and send it out to Mari. Now, Mari works with FBXs and OBJs, but it prefers OBJs. But before I go ahead and do that, I need to do a couple of things. So I'm first gonna go ahead and check its UVs. I'm basically sculpted this in ZBrush and then brought it into Maya, and you know, I basically get this. So if we look at the UVs, and then over here you can see that it's kind of cut it in a weird way, and I would like to straighten some stuff out. So usually what I do is I make sure that my UVs are perfect. It's a good practice to get this right from the get-go. So I'm just going to sew everything, double click, go to unfold, unfold, there we go, close these. I mean, I like all the new tools in Maya 2018, but boy, have they made this more complex. Jeez, look at this. How many clicks just to align something? Anyway, getting off topic. Here we go. I'm pretty happy with this. I tend to just scale down a bit and bring it up to make sure that I don't go into any other UDIMs. So what is a UDIM? Basically, as you see, I go over the line over here between my 0 and 1 space in my UVs. You'll see that I get another area. Basically, what you want to do is have your object that you're texturing is in a 0 to 1 space. Now, Mari does support multiple UDIMs, but it really depends what you want to do with this. Now, if this is a gaming asset, then you would have all of your UVs in the same UDIM. But if this was a let's say film, or basically film or advertisement, then you could make as many UDIMs as you want because you're using a render engine. So I'm gonna move that aside for a sec and go up here, and now I'm gonna select the stem. And here I won't do too much changes. The only thing is I'm going to do is double click it. I'm going to unfold again, just so it's a little better, and scale down. And then I'm actually going to move it over to the next UDIM up. So just so I have everything cleaned up. Now, again, I could export these out separately and then bring it into Mari separately. But in this case, I'm going to do them together just so you can get the idea how this works. So now what I'm going to go is to transfer, and then make sure that my move is set to 1, and just press this button here, and it's going to move it over. So now when I go into object mode and select both, you can see each one has its own UV space. So this is in UV space 2, and this is in UV space 1, and each one of these UDIMs are going to be separate. So let me close that. And I am gonna basically grab the entire group, go to export selection, and I want it to an OBJ. In this case, I'm just gonna throw it onto the desktop. So pumpkin for Mari. There we go. Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and open Mari. In the next segment, we will be looking at Mari itself. So I'll see you in the next segment. Hello everyone, and now we are going to jump into Mari. Let's understand what's going on. When you first open Mari for the first time, it will ask you to basically create a directory and create like a folder where it will do all the caching. In my case, and I just want to show you guys something quick. My PC is fairly full. So about 78% of my hard drive has already been taken up. What you should do is always have a hard drive that is dedicated for work and not containing everything in it. So it's basically going to do all the caching and stuff like that. Mari tends to build up, the more layers you build up, the more cache it's going to use, the more memory it's going to use. You could get to terabytes of information before you are done. So having 78% of your hard drive used up is not a good idea. So this is an indicator of your hard drive. Again, you can buy an external hard drive and always have Mari go to that one. Of course, you can change all of this, but by default, I have it set to my one of my drives, which is kind of full, and that's why you see this 78%. All right, I digress. So the first thing, once you get to this window, it's asking you to create a project. Usually I have like a default project. I removed it, but let's do that. So I'm going to go create a new project, and we don't really need to know much about this, but the way it works, basically you can write a name in here. Let's go to my desktop, open that, and pumpkin for Mari, open. And basically, because it's an OBJ, I have all these settings. I'm not going to go into this. There's many tutorials on the internet. You could change your root path. This is set to mine, is set to the C user. Again, we can change all of that stuff. Now, by default, it's asking you to create all kinds of channels. It's giving you like default channels you can create. I'm not going to create any because you can do this after the fact. Something I didn't know, I found out much later. All of these you can change, but let's just talk about them anyway quickly. Basically what you get is what they call a channel, and a channel is, if you think about it, it's like a session in Photoshop. So this is like a session in Photoshop, and then you can decide your resolution, what kind of color space it is. So by default it's sRGB, but you can also make it a default RAW and so on. Depends on what, if you're working on film or not. You could also decide if it's a 32-bit or 16-bit, if it's going to support transparency and so on. And then you have the naming. I will talk about the naming of this later. Anyway, let's just press OK. Cool, it's come up. So there we go. We've created our first Mari scene. I'm going to stop here. In the next segment, we'll look at navigation and tabs and a little bit of the interface. I'm going to stop it here and we'll move on. All right, we're back. All right, so in the previous segment, we set up the scene. Now all we need to do is start painting and navigating and all of that jazz. But before we go ahead, I'm going to slow down a bit and I'm going to just go over the interface really quick. I said slow and quick. Anyway, just to give you the general idea where things are and where to look for things when you get stuck. So basically what you got here is we'll start off with these tabs. This is your viewport. You have like a help information here on the side. Each tool, as you go through it, you'll get the information on how it works just over here. It's not always very clear, but just take the time to look at the options it's giving you. So just look at that. By default, you set to an orthographic view. That means it's basically flat. It's not true 3D. We also have a perspective view. This will, just so we can get the idea of what things look like. And we can actually put some background and stuff in here and get proper lighting. It's pretty cool. All right, let's move on. Then we got ortho and UV. This is very useful because you can paint in here and paint here. And then you got UV on its own. I'm just going to move this over. There you go. And then we got the project window. So you can switch projects as you're working. So there you could even copy stuff over from one project to the next. It's pretty cool that way. All right, so I'm going to go back to my orthographic view, and I'm going to go up here. So we got our basic menus, everything that you need to find either is in your palettes over here, or it's in the menus. And even you basically, whatever you right click over, eventually you can find it over here in the menus. Like your object list, you can add and stuff objects. You'll actually find a palette that just does that. Just, you know, organize the objects that you have in the scene. Now, something I forgot to mention, that any menu like this is called a palette. They basically consider this like your painter's palette. So everything that you need to use to paint is at hand. So when you go looking for something, let's say for other palettes that aren't here, like an object palette, you will go into view because you want to view a palette, and then you'll see you get a whole list of stuff, and there you go. There's the object palette, there's a color manager, and many other things that aren't on by default. All right, and we'll talk about some of those later. All right, so we have our save and undo, redo. You got a paint modes. You got your the way that the brush will behave, the radius, the opacity, the flow. All of these things belong to the brush from paint onward. Then we got some navigation stuff and more painted stuff. It's just the way, you know, mostly painting and your canvas. The next thing is display. So display will come up and say wireframe and other things like that. So it's pretty useful. Then we'll have some selection tools and display tools and your mirroring and some other things that's not important. And then we have our layer, our palettes, our layer, the layer that we're working on, the layer we're working on, and below it, and all layers, which we'll talk about in a sec. All right. How do we navigate? It's the same shortcuts as in Maya. You hold down Alt, left click to kind of tumble around, middle mouse, left, right, and then track in, track out with the right mouse button. If you're using a pen like I am right now, all you need to do is hold down Alt and put the pen to the tablet, and then you can tumble around. You can also dolly in, dolly out by holding down the bottom button on the pen, and to move left and right, dolly left, dolly right, you can hold the top button, which is, as you can see, is not working. So we have to fix that, and in the next segment we'll look at how to set that up. So I'll see you in the next segment. Alright, so we're back. We saw the interface. Now we can look at how to set up our tablet and how to control our brush, and then we'll move into some painting. So first, let's go control our brush. So I'm going to just go to Cortana over here and type Wacom tablet. There we go. Now that should bring up this setup. I'm going to go to my Mari setup when I'm on my pen, and I think I need to, no, it should be middle mouse click. Are they both middle mouse? It's right click, it's the bottom, middle mouse is the top. That's weird. Let's check this out. So this is supposed to be middle mouse. Huh. That is very weird. It seems to be weird. So I'm going to reset to default. Let's see if it still does that. Alright, so I'm going to just redo this. Alright, so when I'm selected on my pen, I'm gonna basically press plus there, Mari, and I think it was just the version of Mari. Okay, and so I got Mari now added, and I'm gonna change this from double click to middle mouse click, and I think I'm good now. So if I test this out, it goes in and out, left and right. We are all good. Hooray! All right, so as we can see, I can now navigate. It's great. Next thing. All right, so I'm in my brush, and you can see that I have these shortcuts. So R is gonna basically change the radius of my brush. W is gonna rotate it around. Q is to squash. So W now is going to turn that, and then O, which is on the other side of the keyboard, is going to kind of change the opacity. Notice that up top here, the opacity, as I change it, changes here, and the same with all of these, the flow and all of that jazz. Right? Look at the size, the radius, it's all big and stuff. All right, so that's just your pen. And that's how we get it to work. Cool. I'm gonna go into my little selection tool here, and I'm gonna just select an object. Now by default, I think it's set to everything. So as you can see, I got 2 items in my scene, but I just want to work on the pumpkin. I don't want to paint the whole thing. Just so you can see, I'm even getting the 2 UDIMs up here. So the way that Mari works, it recognizes set objects by its UVs. So if I want to basically set up a UDIM, so if I just choose the object, it will choose it by its UDIM. So if I had this broken up into several sections, I could actually select those sections just by pressing this button. I could also choose faces, and then I have the option of Smart Select up here and saying, oh, choose this by the UVs, and then it will basically do the same thing. But this is a bit different. All right. I'm gonna keep this on in this case, because I just got this one object and one UV shell on this, and go back to my orthographic. And what I want to do is isolate selected. So the best way is right click. All right, and then you go down to visibility, and then you could go hide unselected. And there you go. And we just got this guy. Hooray. Look at that. Cool. Now with the orthographic, there's one thing I haven't shown you, is that we can change the different ways we are looking at stuff. So if you press 1, that will be like the front view, back view, top view, bottom view, and opposite view. So it basically works the same here. You can look at all of the options, and this is basically going to flip whatever. I've just gone up to all the way up to 6, so you got all of these options. So it's pretty cool what we can do with this. The next video, we're going to talk about painting. We could actually start painting. Look at this, and we are something like 20 minutes in, and I haven't even done any texturing. Isn't that sad? So let's get straight to it. All right, here we are. We're back. So let's start painting. So before we start painting, we need to basically create a material and create some channels. Now, the cool thing is we've got this default channel that's always there. We can create our own channels. Now, what's a channel? Channel is like, if you guys work in Photoshop, it's like opening a session and building layers and textures there, and then the next step is you will save that out, go into Maya, and then put those textures into the shader. So here we kind of cut out taking it into Maya or 3ds Max or whatever, and attaching it to the shader. Here you could actually do that and see the result. So let's create that session. So in this case, I just want to create a new session. So we could all press these colors. So we can decide that by default we don't want any color. We could have 50% gray, white, or black. So I like 50% gray. I'm also going to make this a 2K image and 8-bit because I don't want to be here forever, and I don't have much space on my hard drive, so I'm making this pretty small. We can again make it any size. We can even make it an 8K and higher. Let's keep it 2K for now. So I'm just going to create a new channel. It's going to create a quick channel, and I'm going to change the name. Now I'm going to start typing, so this is going to be my, of course it's going to lose, don't know why it does that. In diffuse. Alright, so that's my diffuse. Oops, I dropped an E. Never mind. This is going to be my diffuse layer. It means it's going to be the color layer. Now I could go ahead and create my, let's see, what else can we create? A spec. So this will be, god damn it. Pumpkin underscore spec for specular. Alright, so I got these, and I could create the bump and so on. You know what, let's do that as well. So 50% gray, and can underscore and cool. So I got all my layers, basically not layers. We got all of our, let's say, Photoshop projects, right? But I want to start off with diffuse and make sure that I'm selected on that. And then we're going to go over here. You'll see that I have, I think it started off with this shelf over here. We're going to go over to this tab with channels, create the channels. Then we're going to go back to shaders. Of course, we can move these around, but let's not mess with it too much. I could basically tear this off for now, just so you can see that what I'm talking about. So you could tear off and dock anything in Mari. It's great if you have two screens. So here we go. Let's just stretch that out and move this down. All right. So I want to create a new material. So I'm going to just press this button over here and create a blend, because I like blend. Blend gives me a lot of options. And then you'll see you got this default diffuse color. So all I need to do is go down to my diffuse pumpkin, and that's going to be my default. And then I could do the same for the bump and the specular, but for now we are going to wait with this. Now the cool thing is, because I have a material, right, I can go down over here and actually see that I can control its attributes. We'll get back to that later, but you can have a lot of control, like for example, how much specular does this have, or how strong the specular is, how strong the diffuse is, so on. So I'm just going to reset these by pressing R, and we're ready to go. All right, so let me just redock that. You know what, I'll show you. Let's say I closed that by mistake and said, oh no, I closed it by mistake. Now I go to palettes, and what did I want to do? Materials, right? Shaders, there we go. Shaders, oh, there's my shaders, and just drag it until I get those little ants around it, and there we go, it's now docked. Alright, so I'm up on this 5 minutes. We haven't started painting yet, but we set everything up. So the next video, now that we know how to control the brushes, we know how to navigate, we know how to build all of this stuff, now we can paint. Alright, now we're ready to paint. As I've said, and you have seen, when you work in Mari, there's a lot of prep. And when you get used to this, it's pretty quick. It doesn't take 25 minutes, but you gotta prep. Once you're ready, you can start painting. I'm gonna go to my paint tool over here, And I'm going to just change the radius by holding down R, and I'm going to paint, and you see nothing's happening. Now the reason that's happening is because our object's not selected. So I've got to select it and go to my paint tool, and oh voila. So now it's selected, and you can see that it's painted in. The way that Mari works, what you do is you go paint on the screen, and by default it says auto bake here, where it says bake your texture. So as I move, you can see it. You paint, you move, it does a calculation. You paint, you move, it does a calculation. Now, this is very uncomfortable. Most artists don't do this. So I'm just gonna go and undo. Notice that the undo is gonna clear all of that out. What happens is that in your projection over here, the projection palette, you need to change a few attributes. Now, by default, it's made, for this is what we think is the best. I find it very annoying that I have to wait for my screen to move. Sometimes I make a stroke, and then I wanted to readjust the camera before I lay down that stroke. Now this is the power of Mari. It's not just going and painting on something. You can actually adjust what you're doing before you lay down the paint. So it's basically like pulling a pen over and then releasing the spray onto it. So it's kind of, well, there's no real world analogy for this that I can think of. The way that we're going to do this is in your projection palette, under projection, we want to turn this to, for now, manual. Alright, so what manual will do, as I create a stroke, alright, notice now that when I move, the stroke remains, but the pumpkin moves. Now, I need to bake that down, so I could use the shortcut to bake by pressing B. I notice it's baked, but I still have that line, so now I could go over here and bake again. So now I can use the same stroke in several places. This is very powerful. Alright, now let's say I want to clear this out. So to clear out, you hold down Control-Shift-B. That will bake and clear out. You can also do another one. Do just Control-Shift-C, and that will just clear all of it out. Okie dokie. So that's the workflow. Alright, another thing, in this case, I want to paint this pumpkin, just paint it fully, just this one orange color, right? So what I'm going to do is just take my mouse over to the color palette over here, and I'm going to just choose an orange color. I think I'm going to start off with a lighter orange, not as saturated, like so. Just because later on I'm going to burn that in. So I'm going to just paint that on and press Control-Shift-B, which is going to bake and clear. And then you'll see that basically what I'm getting is a projection. Now, sometimes you want this, but in this case, I don't want it. I want to project right through to the other side. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my projection palette. I'm going to go to projection, and when it says front, we're going to go to through. And now I'm going to paint again, press Shift-Control-B, and then we go, ta-da! It is now fully painted, and I got a lovely orangey color. Alright, cool. So that is setting up your paint and paint workflow. The next segment we'll talk about layers. So layers is going to give me that extra power. So I'll meet you soon. Alright, we are now in the next segment, and in this segment we'll talk about layers. We've seen how the brush works, how we can paint, but as I mentioned before, we created these channels, and right now I'm working on a diffuse pumpkin channel. And I said, the analogy I made to this, it's like opening a Photoshop session. So in Photoshop, we have the option to kind of layer in our drawing. Otherwise, if I came here, it's just switched it to black, and then let's say just drew, I don't know, a smiley face on this, and then baked it in. We'll bake it all on the same layer, and then I wouldn't have control over its behavior. So Mari lets us basically create those layers of work, so we don't be destructive, and we have a lot more play, and we can kind of iterate as much as possible. So I just pressed 1 on the keyboard to get to my front view. Now we're going to go down over here near projection. You will see that there's a tab that says layers on it, and then it also tells you the layer that right now it belongs to the pumpkin diffuse. So I'm just going to tear that off and drag until I can dock it on the side here, so you can see better what I'm doing. So you got different types of layers. We're going to start off with the most basic one, which is a paint layer. We just need to go down here, and this icon over here that's turned orange, where you can see this palette, just press plus, and it creates a paint layer. You could also create paint layers by going to layers, and you could add layer. That's just a regular paint layer, and then you got all kind of adjustment layers and procedural layers, which we'll talk about in a minute. Let's see how this works. I am going to hold down R and turn down the radius, and let's just draw in. Of course, there are better ways of doing this, but this is just to illustrate. So, okay, we got a mouth, and we got scary eyes. There we go. And I'm just going to press Control Shift B, and that's going to bake that in. All right. Now it's projected it right through, so I'm going to undo. And over here in my projection menu set, drop down or tab, we are going to just make that to front, and then we are going to bake it clear, and now it's just on one side. Alright, so we have this paint layer, and we can turn it on and off. So if we don't like it, we can now delete it. What else can we do with this layer? So the next tab over is a masking layer. Well, it adds a mask to the layer. So in Photoshop, you can do this a lot. Is let's say you want just to choose a certain area that you don't like. Let's say I want to sharpen this over here. So, but I don't want to start deleting. I want to have this iterative. So I can press that, and it creates a little layer here. And then, as long as it's black, I can go, and it's not really deleting. It's actually masking this out, and I'll show you what I mean. There we go. Let's say, again, this is not deleting. It's not deleting the pixels. It's just masking it out. And to prove it to you, we can touch this little icon here, and what you will see is basically me just drawing out a mask by using the black color, and that will basically mean that whatever's black is going to be painted out. It behaves. Now we could do other things. I'll show you a little to control this. So now if I go back to the entire stack, you can see I've basically deleted a lot of stuff. Now the cool thing is I could change this to white, and let's make the radius big, and then I could just paint that out again. So, and it doesn't, you know, it's kept the original drawing in there. Alright, so we looked at paint layers. We saw we can create a mask that allows us to basically mask out certain areas. Let's say half the mouth is gone, maybe this eye, and so on. Alright, what's the next step? Let's look at adjustment layers. So adjustment layers are pretty cool. I'm going to delete this layer. So to delete a layer, I'm just gonna pull this out a bit. You got this little icon here with the minus on it. I'm gonna just delete that layer, and I'm gonna clear out my masks. Alright, so an adjustment layer is kind of cool because adjustments let you adjust. So I'm going to create an adjustment layer, and just to give you a good idea what you can do, let's do a HSV layer. So HSV layer lets you change the hue. So let's say we don't like the color, we can change the hue, the saturation, make it, you know, more saturated, less saturated, and its value, like how bright it is. So now I have this really saturated orangey. This is more like an orange than a pumpkin, but you get the idea. So, and again, this is a layer, so I could go and turn this on and off. I could even tone it down. Let's say maybe I do like the coloring, I just don't want it to be as strong. So I can basically just knock it down or bring it up. Alright, so that's an option. Alright, what other kind of layers do we have? So the next one over, as you saw, we saw adjustment layers. Next one is a procedural layer. So procedural layers are really awesome. And why they're awesome is because you can do a lot of cool things. For example, I can go down here and go to noise and create a purlin noise. And what it does, it will create this kind of noisy look to it. And then I can, you know, say, all right, let's make that like that. And I get this noise. And then over here at the top, we got all of these kind of overlays options. So I'm going to choose copy and then right click, so that turns blue. It's blue. With the down arrow, we could start paging through them. And you'll see it's going to start behaving differently as I go down. All right. And again, if you work in Photoshop, you definitely know what this is. So that was a color burn. But let's say I like this. So I got this nice effect. So now we got these like dimples on it or something that looks like that. All right. The next thing I want to show you is stacking. So let's say I like this, but I want to add some more effects, but I don't want to keep on building up. I want this to be just belonging to this layer. So what I can do, we can basically build a stack of effects. So if I go over here, as you can see, we got this this icon over here, which will allow me to add, as before, if you look at layers, procedural layers or adjustment layers, this one will allow me to add adjustment layers as a stack on that layer, which is really cool. It's something that you cannot do in Photoshop. So let's have a look at that. I am going to, let's say, ask for levels. So now it's created the stack, which is basically, if I click on it, you'll see I get a new layer tab that has got one layer that's called levels. And now if I start changing this level, so let's make it darker, lighter, or I can even, you know, choke it. So it goes, chokes it away, and then let's say choking it. All right, and that's cool. So let's say I like this. I'm actually gonna invert it. So let's do invert. So now what I've done is inverted the color. So now I've got all these little spots on it. Let's say I want even less of these spots. So I'm gonna go over here. Let's see, play around with these. It's gonna just soften it. A little tiny spots. So I got all these spots. So I've used like the levels and the invert to kind of create these little spots on it. Now the cool thing is that I can go and say, oh, I could actually add a procedural. So let's add a procedural and add another noise, but this time a cell noise. Alright, so now we got the cells on it. And then I can just dial these down to about that size. And I'll leave it as is, but what we can do here is, let's say, soft light. It's a little too soft. So now we're going to do hard light. There we go. So now we can actually see like a really cool effect. So with that, I'm going to end this segment, and in the next segment we can see how to organize all of this and copy and move over to other channels. So I'll see you in the next segment. Okay, so in the previous section we looked at using layers, and we saw that we can create just paint layers, we can build masks on the layers, we can stack different effects and procedural textures one into the other using stacks, and many more other options. Now there's a lot more that we can do, but for now let's just have a look at a few little other things that we can do. So organization wise, we can create a folder, they call it group, so we can group all of these together. So I'm going to just grab these and just drag and drop them into the group. So now I've got a group, so it's kind of a folder. I could name this, let's say, base, and this will be my base colors. Now I could also just remove the base. Base, you write with an E, not with a Y. There we go. So base, let's say this is going to be a base spots. Alright, so basically what I want to do is, let's say, multiply that on top. There we go, multiply maybe screen. Soft light. Well, let's say this is the best option. I think that's pretty cool. Alright, so the reason I've done this is basically maybe later on I want to use this somewhere else. So let's say I do want to use this somewhere else. I can right click and go copy, and go to my channels, and actually just go to my material first, and here in the blend I'm going to go to my bump layer, alright, under my bump layer thing, and I'm just going to go to a channel I created called bump. So now it's assigned. So there's an assigned. You won't see much difference because it's just 50% gray on that when I created it. But let's say now I want to kind of mess around with this channel. So we're going to go to the channel. I'm going to choose bump. Sorry, bump. And you'll see that I got this base layer. So all I need to do is click on it and go paste, and we'll add onto that. Just wait for it. Alright, we'll add a bump. So as I get closer, you should be able to see the bump. Now we can just isolate that like that, and you can actually see the bump. Now the cool thing is that I can go back to my material and let's turn it on, back to the bin, and under the bump over here, if we go down here, let me just tear this off so you guys can see what's going on. We got all of this list of stuff that we can do. So we got displacement, which I'm not interested, but bump I can actually go and make a lot sharper. So if we look at it now, you can see that these things are all bulging out. So we're getting these like little bulges. Now here and say, well, let's invert that. So it's going to think of it, and now all of these little nodules will go the opposite way because I've inverted the colors. Boom. So there we go. So it's now inverted, and we got these inverted colors. So these points are kind of sticking out now. And this is pretty cool. We got a lot of power here. So what did I do with that? Channel back to its original positioning. So if I go all the way down here to the bump, I'm just going to knock that down. Let's just reset it, and then pull it slightly out. There we go. So now we've basically duplicated the layer and then brought it into a different, let's say, work session. So now if I want to go back to the previous session, all I need to do is press on pumpkin and I get back to this here and we can continue working. But now I have these bumps on it. All right. So let's see what else we can do with this. We can create other types of procedurals, and really these things are kind of cool because you can create, I don't know, let's have a look. Selection mass, soft normals, turns, UVs, lighting, projections. There's a lot of stuff that you can create here. Like I create a solid color or a vector. Not sure what this does, we'll see in a minute. So this is like a vector color, and we can use this for many other things. So this would be like X, Y, Z. I'm not sure exactly what this does, but you can play around with this. But the cool thing is, like, now you can see the bump, it's got this oily look to it. I'm gonna just remove it. So to remove a layer, I just click on it and go down to remove, and there we go. Now if I create a mask and I want to remove the mask, again I click on it and we go down to remove. Where is it? Layer masks and remove mask, and it will remove the mask. So yeah, so that's it. I wanted to show the final things in layer. I mean, again, there's a lot more. Oh, one final thing before I move on to the next thing. As you can see that the colors here are slightly changing. As they turn red, they're using more and more memory, and in the next video, or towards the end, I'll show you how we can bake it down so Mari won't use as much memory. So I'll see you in the next section, and we will see how to control some projection masks and create all kind of other features. So see you then. Alright, so we're back. In this section or segment, we'll be talking about projection masks. So what they're going to allow me to do is basically areas where I cannot paint on. So that's kind of cool, and then we'll move on to other types of things. So what I'm going to do is create a paint layer, and I'm going to choose a color. So let's just go over here, and I want this dark. Let's make it even darker, orange type. Alright, so when I paint, this is what I get. Alright, I'm also going to change my brush. So what I want to do is, in my projection tab, we have the option to basically use different projection masks. So firstly, we must make sure that the mask preview is enabled, and then I can turn on, let's say, edge mask, and it's going to think a bit. Alright, and what it's going to do, everywhere it's pink, it's not going to paint. So let's just press 1 here, and I'll start painting like that. Alright, and then I'll turn off the mask. I will bake it in. Alright, and clear. And then I'll turn off the mask. And what you'll notice is the areas that were highlighted are not, oops, didn't I clear that out? You'll see that the areas that were highlighted did not get painted. See? Now I am, using font. So this is pretty cool. Alright, so I'm gonna just go here and just go here. Alright, so let's look at the next one. Channel I'm gonna skip, ambient occlusion I'm gonna skip. I'm gonna go to depth mask. So we can do that, and I just press the little black arrow so it opens up the options here. And what will this do is look at the entire scene and how far the object is from us, and it will allow us to basically, let's say, just paint what's nearest to us. So again, I'm going to just go paint and clear. I'm going to turn off the mask, and you're going to get this. So you get this kind of burnt, this was close to the fire type thing. Alright, moving on. So that was the depth mask. Back face is basically if there's anything at the back, but fractal noise is actually one of the more useful ones. I use this quite a lot. It's like I'm starting to run out of memory here. Alright, so what it does, it creates this fractal, and you can basically mess around with, you know, the way it behaves and the noise, how strong it is, you know, how much goes through, how much doesn't. So now what I can do is just paint that and bake that in. So I press Control Shift B, and then let's turn this off. And then what I get is this. So you could see like some areas got more, some got less, some got none. Now, what's really cool about this whole thing, I'm just pressing undo, is that we can start, let's say, kind of mixing and matching. So let's say I'll add this noise, something like that, and then let's say this add the edge mask. So that's going to think of it. I'm going to open its preferences while we wait. Alright, and then here I can make these like a lot stronger. And let's say have the radius larger and fall off. Alright, so all of that's not going to get painted. Alright, and then let's say depth mask. Turn that on. And then this one, I'm going to just make sure I don't get the edges as well. Alright, so now all I need to do is start painting. I'm actually going to press B. And I'm going to turn the whole thing around like so. B. Now because the way I'm working, I'm just pressing B. I don't need to repaint, I'm just reprojecting. So now when I'm done, I could just clear out everything. Actually, I needed to do one here as well, so let's just do another B here. And be here. Alright, I think we're done. So now all I need to do is just turn off these masks and clear out everything, and this is what we get. So I could use the masks to do all kind of effects, and you know, then go in and paint. So let's say I'm happy with this. Clear out. Now overlay, so that makes nicer. Maybe not overlay. Exclude. Well, what I'm going to do is pause the video, find the channel that I want to use, and then we end the video. Alright, so I landed up using hard light. And the cool thing is, because it's hard light, I can now go in and paint in areas. And Oh, I didn't bake that in, so let's just Control Z, 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 and bake. Go down here, let's just do that here. And bake. And clear. Alright, so we're happy with this. Alright, so that was the projections and using paint and paint layers. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to paint in a projection or a picture, how to bring in pictures, how to use them as reference, and so on. So I'll see you in the next video. Alright, we are back. In the previous segment we looked at how to kind of create a paint layer using projection masks. In this short tutorial I will show you how to use projections and images as reference and how to bring them into Mari. So there's something called an image manager. You could go to this little tab over here, and I'm just gonna pull this down so you can have a better look. We can basically call up any image by pressing this button here and navigate to wherever you want to go. But there's an easier way, of course. We can just go to a folder somewhere on a hard drive, choose the files we wish to take. Actually, I don't want that one. I want that one, and then drag and drop them, and they'll just load. So that's pretty easy, right? And then what I can do is bring up the image and then have closer look at it and get some of the details, understand how it looks and so on. So we can use this window as a reference. We can also just use these as image color palettes. So to do that, you go down to your colors. Let me just reset everything. And then all I need to do is grab, let's say, this pumpkin here, drag it into the image tab, and now drag it out. You'll see that I got this image, and as I hover over the image, you'll see that it's going to grab the color. It's going to put that color there, and then I can just go ahead and paint that in. Let me just create a new layer for that. And just paint that specific orange onto my pumpkin. Alright, I did make one little change. I'll show you now to my preferences. So I'm going to hold on B, and that's going to bake in. If you go down to projection, painting projection, you will find that I now put the behavior to clear only. So as I press B, when I press B, it will just bake and clear out the mask. It won't hold it there. So the minute I press B, I'm basically saying I'm happy with this, just bake it in. So do that, and it's now baked. Alright, I'm going to use this color, and I'm just going to knock it down a bit, so it's got a little bit of the color, well, the color overlay, like that. Should just overlay it. Overlay. So that's overlaid, and things are getting a little too yellow for me. Maybe just additive. See? Oh, it's even getting worse. Darken. There we go. So we use this to darken, and then I can also knock down the colors. Its opacity, so I get just a little bit of it. Alright. Yeah, so I'm going to create a new paint layer. This one's going to be for projection. So if I want to take an image and I project it on to my pumpkin, firstly I'm going to change this back to manual. This is important for this, and I'll explain later. But what I'm going to do is go to my file. When I got this Felix the cat image that I downloaded off the interwebs, and all I need to do is drag and drop it into the scene, and as you can see, I get a projection. My tool changes over here to the projection tool. And now to control my projection, so if I press shift, I can move it around. If I press Control, I can rotate it. If I press them both together, I can scale it. So now I can scale, rotate, and move to the correct position. I'm going to reset my tool over here to white, and what I'm going to do is just start painting this in, and as you can see, as I paint it in, it's going to just draw that in like so. So I got Phoenix the cat in there. Alright, cool. Now, until I press B, nothing's going to happen, right? It's not going to commit. So let's commit. I'm pressing B, and I'm not gonna move out, and I'll show you why. Let me just press Z so everything realigns. I want to create a mask, and because I want to cut out the white bits. To do that, I'm actually going to use a stacked mask, just because I want to invert the colors later. So I'm going to create a stacked mask. So it's going to go in there. I'm going to go there, press that, and you can see it's already doing something. But now I have to press B. So I needed to keep the projection in the same place. Alright? So if I go back to my button here, you can see that it is now the blacks have all been removed. Now if I go here, choose this, and choose that layer. So chosen on the layer, you can see that the layer is black and white. I'm actually going to dock this so it doesn't go away. Alright? So now I'm on that. I can now go to an adjustment layer and say invert. So now this becomes black and white, right? So if that's inverted, and I go back to my original layer, let's turn all of that on, you will see now that Felix is in the correct place. Now I can just remove clear my buffer, and you'll see that it's perfect. Alright, so I also want to add this into my bump. So what I can do is just grab this, and we'll call this Felix. Oh, god damn it. I hate when it does this. Felix Roach for projection. And I'm just going to right click, copy, go to my channels, bump, so that goes over here. I'm going to close this so I don't get confused, and choose the invert over here and press paste. So now that's on top. So when I go back here, you can see it looks fine, but what I want to do is go back to my materials, or my shaders, excuse me, choose my blend. That's going to think a bit. Alright, we're back, and now because I'm on the material, you can actually see it's now carved Mr. Felix inward. So if I want to invert that, we've got Felix projection here. I can go back to the channels, bump channel, and just move this underneath the invert. So now this is gonna supposedly think. We're waiting. Yep, that is now supposedly the other way. Shaders. I don't know why it didn't change, but it's supposed to be outward. Anyway, but you guys get the idea. So now I have Felix the cat on there. Cool. So I'm going to end this segment here. In the next one, we're going to talk about display and how to make things look a little nicer in our display. And then I'll end off with how to get our textures out. And that's it. And that will be done. And you will have working in Maya. Alrighty. So here we are, where we left off, and I kind of like what I see, but I don't know how this is going to behave in an environment. So let's go to my perspective view just quickly, because this is more likely what you will see. And what I want to see is, you know, if this was in an environment, how would this behave? How would this seem, you know, how the highlights would be, and so on. So to do that, we can actually change the way that the viewport works. So in our view, we go down to palettes, and we want to choose our lights. And it's opened up the lights on the side here for me. And what we can do is choose the lights. I'm actually going to pull this out and drop it back here, because we're done with the layers for now. And the cool thing is, so let's do the first light. You can see we can control the light, its intensity. Any one of these lights, we can change the color, so specularity, drop off, and so on. Let's say red and drop off blue. So now when I move the light and change the intensity, you should see that's got a little more blue to it. Alright, we can also just reset everything back to where it was. We could also turn these off. So that goes for all the lights. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So there's 4 lights. You can just turn them off. And notice we could still see things, just everything would be pretty much flat. Alright, so we also got an environment light, and this is very cool because I can actually bring in an HDR image. HDR is high dynamic range. That will let you basically get more real world lighting. So I have some that I use a lot. Let's do an outdoor exterior. I like this one very much. Alright, so we got this nice daytime exterior, and now we can immediately see that our pumpkin is not right. That several things are wrong with it. Like, for example, the bump may be too high, and the specularity is all wrong. So I'm going to go to my material here, and I'm just going to drag the material out and dock it on the other side. I'm going to take this down like so. Alright, so firstly we can change the specular drop off, and the specular itself we can knock it almost all the way down, so it's just a little bit of specular. Let's go down to the bump itself. We can also just make that a little, let's say 0.1, 0.12. It's a nice little, so you get that little tiny bumps. It breaks it up, but not too bad. I think these are going the wrong way, so I could take that to the minus, or we can see, I just changed the way I changed the bump mode, so let's see what that does. It didn't do much, but it did something. That means I could always go back to my, let's see, my layers. This is so heavy now, I can't, there we go. Maybe remove the invert. Alright, so remove the invert, so now I get a different, this is really slow. Get a different result. But, you know, kind of get that cellular kind of feeling. I could probably change some more stuff, but that's the idea. We can get a better look. Let's look at some other options the lights give, this environment light gives us. So firstly, I can rotate the entire scene, so don't have to move. I could just check to see how the light breaks. I could up the resolution. I can change the speed. There's actually like an animation right now, it's done static, so I can have it move. That just gives me a headache. The coolest thing, what I do is I blur it out. So there's, we can change the intensity of the sun. Where's the blur? There we go, there's a blur. So I can blur this out so we don't have to see all the image. And then it kind of gives us a better idea of what we're looking at. We're not getting distracted by the background. So yeah, that's it. That's the lighting. And we can do, of course, we could always turn back on one of the lights just by pressing on it and choosing it and then playing around with it. Again, it's pretty easy to navigate this. So under the palettes, again, we're going to go to View, Palettes, Lighting, and you can actually choose that. Alright, the next segment is going to be how we get our textures out of Mari and into Maya. Let's get cracking at that. I'll see you soon. Okay, so we are back, and this is the final part. This is how we get things out of Mari so we can put them together in Maya. And now that we have this lovely pumpkin, what can we do with it? So what we're going to do is we are going to go to, let me just grab my shader and move it back to where it was, just to keep things organized. So there's several ways that we can export stuff out. So one, you can right click, go export on your layers, and then just go flatten. I'm not always sure that it's, well, I'll probably get rid of everything. So we're gonna go to export, export all layers flattened. All right, it's gonna open up this window, okay? And a couple of things we need to make sure. So firstly, where is this going to go? I have on my desktop, double click, I got this pumpkin folder, and basically I wanted to throw it in here. So the next thing we want to do is decide on the name. So we can have the channel name and the UDIM. So as you recall, the UDIM is that UV space name. So if it's UDIM 1, UDIM 2, and so on. I also like to add you know, the object that it belongs to. So let's say I imported more than one object, and you can do this in Mari. So let's say I have a wheel and I have the wheel base, then I bring in both geometry separately. I want the geometry name as well. So to do that, this is basically where everything goes wrong with exports, is when it comes down to this name over here. So if things are not exporting right, it's because of the name over here. So firstly, if you have UDIMs, you have to put the $sign UDIM. I always put it in, and then you also want your channels. So remember, the channels basically, it's your diffuse, it's your ambient, and so on. Okay. And then you want the name of the model. So the way that you do that is if you hover over this area here, you get this list of, whoops, you get this list of commands that you can add in to get the name. So you can get your layer name, your node name, your everything you have here, and then it also explains to you at the bottom how to do that. So what we want entity. So we have to start off with $, and then write in caps ENTITY and dot. Sorry, pardon me. And then at the end here, you want to put the file type. So we want JPG or PNG, and then you want to press the export all over there. So it's going to ask you, do you want to override? You're going to say okay, and it's going to override. So I think it just overwrote the one. I don't think it did all the rest. So if you want to do all of them, I think you go to channels and then you do it from here. You do export all channels, because that was layers. And basically I'll leave this and just go here and go export. It just keeps on asking you each channel that you have. And you go, okay. Now I didn't do the spec, so it's probably just going to be like a gray color now. So if I wanted to do the spec, I'm going to do that right away. So let's do the spec really quickly. I'm just going to add it. Let's see. Let's just put a procedural noise, this jitter. And yeah, we want to go to the spec and that. Alright, so that's going to be our jitter, and we can mess around with that a bit. Say, make that like a light gray, and let's add, I don't know, levels. Doesn't matter, I'll probably delete the levels now, like so, and then add here another noise. Curl in above it and make that a multiply, so you get something like that. And let's say I'm happy with this. We could go back to my shader, blend, and what we should get is slight changes, but we'll go to the channels and let's just flatten channels. And let's just do that again and again and again and press OK. Alrighty, so this is done. I'm gonna go to my folder, which should be desktop and pumpkin. And then you can see all the items. I think these are just diffuse. We can delete those. So we have 2 of each. One is the stem, one is the actual pumpkin. And you can see Mari Pumpkin. And then you have the different naming for each one. So this is the diffuse. So that's diffuse over here. And then you have let me just get rid of these. Belong to something else. Alright, so you got your specular, and then over here, of course, and you get 2 again. It's because of the way that Mari colors everything. So this one, the second one, is always going to be the stem. You could delete those out if you don't want them. If you do want them, and then you just bring these in to do what you need to do. Anyway, that's the end of this video. You can take this back into Maya and connect it. I might have just a speed video of me doing that quickly. You know what? I'll make another segment and then just how I connect this up in Maya very quickly. So, see you then. Okay, so we finally finished exporting out all of our textures. I'll quickly run through how everything fits together back in Maya. I could show this in Arnold, but let's just stick to Maya basics. So let me just remove all of that. So I've separated these 2 objects. It's basically the OBJ I had before. Again, when we started off, I used that fancy scene, but here I'm just using the OBJ just to demonstrate. So what I'm going to do is go here, add a blend, just call up the file for that, which is on my desktop and under pumpkin. And as you can see, it says bump, diffuse, and you got 1 and 2. So 1 is usually the first UDIM, and that will be here. I'm going to press 6. I'm going to turn on some of the viewport 2.0 stuff. So if I open my UVs and dock this stupid thing, there we go. If I choose that, you could see that this fits perfectly and it works beautifully. So now all I need to do is go back to my blend, should name it specular color, so I can now call up the specular. Let's do spec 1, and you can see immediately my spec has changed and behaving differently. We can now add my bump. Sorry about that. And add our bump. And as you can see, the bump is way too high, so I'm going to go 0.01. It looks like I didn't do much, but it's there. You can see a little bit of it as I move around. Now I could show you something really cool in Maya 2018. If you choose your object and go to its shape node and go down to displacement, sorry, not displacement, smooth mesh, you'll see this display preview. You'll turn on your displacement. Now nothing's happening because we haven't given it a displacement. So I'm going to go to my blend and I'm just going to go into its inputs, and here under displacement in the render node, we're just going to bring in the same bump map because it's a black and white map, so we can use the same one. And you'll see immediately that our bump now is actually bumping out. It's not just a fake bump. If I get really close, you can see it's actually extruding out. And you can see this. So this is specific for Maya 2018. And again, I can make this, more or less. Just depends what we want to do with this, right? So I can make it a lot rougher. And there you go. So that's all I wanted to show you. And you actually have the same texture as before, and I made it look pretty. So with that, I'm going to end this video. Thank you for joining me. It was a pleasure to take you through a workflow Maya to Mari and teach you the basics of Mari. As I mentioned before, Mari is a very complex and big and fun, could be fun software. If you ever have questions or you want me to go into more detail on a certain topic, I'll be glad to hear in the comments below. Anyway, thank you for joining me and have a good day. Bye-bye.